Bear Grylls joins us now to tell us more. There's the book.
Hey guys.
Absolutely stunning.
Yes.
But it was hard. I had no control. I couldn't quit, and Discovery were like, no, you're contracted. You've got to keep going. And
imagine flipping to Discovery Channel, waiting for your favorite show, and one day it's just gone. No farewell episode, no goodbye, just canceled. That's exactly what happened to Man vs. Wild. And for years, fans were left asking why. Well, today we are pulling back the curtain because the real reason is far more shocking than anyone expected. Let's get into it. But before we get into why everything fell apart, who exactly is the man at the center of this story? Who is Bear Grylls? Before we get into the drama, we need to talk about who Bear Grylls actually is, because his background is genuinely one of the most extraordinary of any TV personality alive today. Born Edward Michael Grylls on June 7, 1974 in London, England, his father was a Conservative MP and passionate outdoorsman who taught his son to climb and sail from a young age. Adventure wasn't just a hobby in the Grylls household, it was practically a religion. But here is where things get extraordinary. Bear didn't stumble into survival television. He actually served in the British Special Air Service, the SAS, one of the most elite military units in the world. The regiment whose motto is literally, "Who dares wins." Bear made it through their notoriously brutal selection process and served as a patrol medic and survival instructor. Then came the moment that could have ended everything. In 1996, during a military parachute exercise in Zambia, his chute malfunctioned at 16,000 feet. He hit the ground and fractured 3 vertebrae in his spine. Doctors told him he came inches from paralysis for life. Most people would have called it quits. 18 months later, Bear Grylls stood on the summit of Mount Everest, becoming one of the youngest Britons to ever do so at just 23 years old. He then crossed the North Atlantic in an inflatable boat, traversed the Arctic, and paraglided over the Himalayas. This was not a man built for television. Television was just the vehicle that brought his story to the world. So how does a man with that kind of background end up eating bugs on global television? The birth of Man vs. Wild. So how did a decorated SAS soldier and Everest climber end up on Discovery Channel? By the mid-2000s, Bear had built a genuine reputation in the adventure world through his expeditions and books. A British production company called Diverse Bristol approached him with a concept: drop him into the world's most dangerous environments with minimal gear, film him surviving, and teach the audience real survival skills along the way. The show launched in the UK in 2006 as Born Survivor, and in the US on Discovery Channel as Man vs. Wild. From the very first episode, it was clear this was something completely different. Each week, Bear would be dropped, sometimes literally by helicopter or parachute, into a remote and hostile location: the Amazon rainforest, the Sahara Desert, the frozen Norwegian fjords, active volcanic regions in Hawaii, the Australian outback. Armed with nothing but his knowledge and his extraordinary physical toughness, he would find food, find water, build shelter, and navigate his way to safety, explaining every step to the audience as he went. The combination was electric: part survival guide, part action movie, part geography lesson, and pure adrenaline from start to finish. At its peak, Man vs. Wild was pulling in over 1.2 billion viewers across 200 million countries. Let that sink in. 1.2 billion people tuning in to watch this man eat raw insects and drink his own urine. Bear Grylls became a global household name overnight. World leaders wanted to be part of it. Prime Minister Narendra Modi filmed a special with him in India. President Barack Obama ventured into the Alaskan wilderness with him for a climate awareness special that generated worldwide headlines. The show was a genuine cultural phenomenon. And then things started to crack. But if everything was going so perfectly, what went wrong? The scandal that nearly ended everything. It was 2007. Man vs. Wild was at the height of its popularity. And then a bombshell dropped that would shake the show and Bear Grylls' reputation to its very foundation. A survival consultant named Mark Weinert, who had worked behind the scenes on the show, went to the Sunday Times newspaper with a story nobody wanted to hear. He claimed that significant portions of what viewers were watching were staged, manipulated, or outright fabricated. The allegations were extraordinary. During an episode where Bear was supposedly stranded alone on a remote Hawaiian island, he was allegedly checking into a local motel every night. A motel with a bed and running water, while audiences at home genuinely worried about his survival. The Polynesian raft Bear built from scratch on camera? The crew had pre-built it, dismantled it, and laid out the pieces for Bear to reassemble on film. The wild horses Bear attempted to lasso in California's Sierra Nevada, trained animals brought in by trailer from a nearby ranch, and the terrifying creature lurking outside his tent in the Rocky Mountains, a crew member in a bear costume. Discovery Channel was forced to admit that isolated elements of the show were not entirely natural to the environment and that survival assistance had been provided. Bear publicly addressed the controversy, acknowledging that some scenes were staged and apologizing for the lack of transparency, while defending the educational value of the survival techniques shown. If people felt misled on how the first series was represented, I'm really sorry for that, he said. But he also defended the show's purpose, arguing it was always meant as a survival demonstration, not a pure documentary. Discovery added disclaimers. New seasons became more transparent, and the ratings, after a brief dip, largely recovered. But the relationship between Bear and Discovery Channel had developed a crack, one that was quietly growing beneath the surface. Here's where the story takes a turn most people never saw coming. The real reason Man vs. Wild was cancelled. Here is where so many people get the story wrong, and where the truth is far more interesting, far more human, and far more shocking than anyone expected. For years, the narrative around Man vs. Wild's cancellation was tied to the staged scenes scandal. The assumption was simple. The show got caught being fake. The audience lost trust. The network lost confidence, and it quietly faded away. A cautionary tale about the dangers of misleading your audience. That narrative is wrong. When Discovery Channel ended Man vs. Wild in 2012, the show was not struggling. It was not hemorrhaging viewers. It was not in creative freefall. The staged scenes controversy had been weathered. The disclaimers were in place. New seasons had been well received. The brand, Bear Grylls, as global survival icon, was actually stronger than ever because it had survived a genuine crisis and come out the other side intact. The cancellation was not driven by collapsing ratings or the earlier scandal. Network statements and availability of later seasons show that the problems were primarily contractual, not audience-based. The real reason Man vs. Wild was cancelled comes down to 3 words: a contract dispute. Here is exactly what happened. In early 2012, as negotiations for Bear's continued relationship with Discovery Channel were underway, the network came to him with a new proposal. But it wasn't simply a renewal of Man vs. Wild on similar terms to before. Discovery had bigger plans. They wanted to expand their relationship with Bear significantly. Specifically, Discovery wanted Bear Grylls to commit to 2 additional projects beyond Man vs. Wild. 2 more shows, under terms set by Discovery, under creative control held by Discovery, projects that would effectively lock Bear into an extended, exclusive arrangement with the network for years into the future. On paper, you might think that sounds like a great deal for Bear. More shows, more exposure, more money, more platform. But here is the thing about Bear Grylls by 2012. He was not the same relatively unknown adventurer who had walked into the Man vs. Wild deal back in 2006. 6 seasons and hundreds of millions of viewers later, he was one of the most valuable entertainment personalities in the world. He had leveraged his television success into a global brand that extended far beyond any single network. Bear Grylls Ventures was a growing enterprise. He had book deals. He had speaking engagements. He had brand partnerships with major companies around the world. He had the Obama special. He had the Modi special. He was, in every meaningful sense, bigger than any single show on any single network. And the terms Discovery was proposing, the exclusivity clauses, the creative control provisions, the scope of the commitment they were asking for, represented exactly the kind of arrangement that would have put a ceiling on everything else he was building. From Bear's perspective, signing that deal would have meant trading his independence for the security of staying on Discovery. And Bear Grylls, a man who had literally chosen to break his back parachuting rather than play it safe, a man who had climbed Everest on a spine that had been shattered less than 2 years earlier, was not a man who made decisions based on playing it safe. He walked away from the table. And Discovery Channel, rather than going back to negotiate a compromise that worked for both sides, made a swift and decisive business decision. They terminated their entire relationship with Bear Grylls, effective immediately. In March 2012, the BBC reported that Discovery had ended all current productions with Grylls, with a statement from the network confirming the decision stems from a continuing contractual dispute, Sifus. Just like that. That was it. One of the most successful shows in cable television history axed mid-negotiation with no final episode, no farewell, no closure for the hundreds of millions of fans who had been watching for 6 years. No Bear Grylls, the final survival, no emotional goodbye, no dramatic final challenge in some impossibly remote location. Just a press release and a contractual dispute that neither side was willing to fully explain in public. For years, the people who loved this show were given nothing. No proper answer. No real transparency. Just the vague language of corporate communication. Contractual dispute, which explained nothing and satisfied no one. It was only in later years, through Bear's own interviews and the gradual emergence of more detailed reporting, that the fuller picture came into focus. That the dispute was specifically about the scope of the commitment Discovery wanted, about the additional projects, about exclusivity, about creative control, about who, ultimately, owned Bear Grylls' time and image and brand. And Bear Grylls had decided, clearly, firmly, and with characteristic stubbornness, that nobody owned Bear Grylls, the man who had survived the SAS, who had fractured 3 vertebrae and come back to climb the highest mountain on Earth, who had crossed the North Atlantic in an inflatable boat. That man looked at a television network's contract demands and said, "No?" So what happens when you walk away from one of the biggest shows on television? Life after Man vs. Wild, Legacy and Impact. Here is what nobody was predicting when Man vs. Wild ended in 2012. That Bear Grylls' career was about to get significantly bigger. Because the conventional wisdom in television is that when a star loses their flagship show, especially through a public dispute with a major network, they struggle. Their profile drops. The momentum they built gets interrupted. Audiences move on. New faces emerge. The industry has a short memory, and yesterday's phenomenon is tomorrow's answer to a trivia question. That is not what happened to Bear Grylls. In fact, what happened after Man vs. Wild strongly suggests that the cancellation was one of the best things that ever happened to him professionally. Freed from the constraints of the Discovery deal, Bear was able to pursue projects on his own terms, on multiple platforms, with a much wider variety of formats. The most notable was Running Wild with Bear Grylls, which premiered on NBC in 2014 and later moved to National Geographic. The format was brilliantly simple. Instead of Bear surviving alone, he would take a single celebrity guest into a genuinely remote environment for a 24-hour survival experience. No crew support for the talent. No comfortable hotel at the end of the day. Just Bear, his guest, and whatever nature threw at them. The celebrities who agreed to do it were extraordinary. Zac Efron, Kate Winslet, who has spoken about how genuinely terrifying and transformative the experience was for her. Roger Federer, Channing Tatum, Michelle Obama, and in the episode that generated perhaps the most media coverage of any outdoor television special in history, President Barack Obama, the sitting 44th President of the United States, trekking through the wilderness of Alaska with Bear Grylls while discussing climate change, wildlife conservation, and the future of the planet. That episode was not just popular television, it was a cultural moment. The leader of the free world, out in the Alaskan backcountry with a former SAS soldier turned TV presenter, eating a piece of salmon that a bear had partially eaten. Because Bear Grylls does not waste food opportunities, even partially bear-chewed ones. The footage of Obama and Grylls together became some of the most widely shared outdoor television content ever produced. Beyond running wild, Bear built relationships with streaming platforms including Netflix. He extended his reach into books, having written more than a dozen titles that together have sold millions of copies worldwide. Everything from survival guides to motivational books to children's adventure series. His Scouts connection deepened, with Bear serving as Chief Scout of the UK, the largest scouting organization in the world, and later becoming Chief Ambassador of World Scouting. He launched outdoor education initiatives for young people. He developed app-based survival training tools. He collaborated with video game companies. Bear Grylls Ventures became a genuinely substantial operation, not just a television brand, but a multi-platform enterprise built around outdoor adventure, resilience, and the idea that human beings are more capable than they typically give themselves credit for. And through all of it, through every new project and every new platform and every new audience, Bear has maintained the same essential message that made Man vs. Wild compelling in the first place. Get outside. Test yourself. Find out what you are made of. Step back from the drama for a moment, the staged scenes, the contract dispute, the abrupt ending, and ask a simple question. What did Man vs. Wild actually mean? Because the answer is more significant than most people realize. Before Man vs. Wild, survival television existed, but it was largely a niche interest. There were documentaries, there were nature programs, there were shows about bushcraft and wilderness living that attracted a dedicated but limited audience. The idea that a survival-based show could become appointment viewing for over 1 billion people worldwide, that it could be discussed at dinner tables in Lagos and London and Los Angeles and Beijing, that idea did not exist before Bear Grylls. Man vs. Wild created a genre. It demonstrated that there was a massive global appetite for content that combined genuine expertise with entertainment, that taught real skills while also delivering real thrills. In the years that followed its peak popularity, the landscape of outdoor and survival television changed completely. Alone, Naked and Afraid, Dual Survival, Survivor Man, Ultimate Survival, Alaska, Fat Guys in the Woods, dozens of shows, all of which owe some portion of their existence to the proof of concept that Man vs. Wild established. The show also changed what was possible for nonfiction television on an international level. Man vs. Wild proved that a British personality with genuine expertise and natural charisma could become a truly global star. Not just popular in English-speaking markets, but watched and celebrated in countries where English was a second language, where the culture was completely different, where the environments Bear visited were either familiar local landscapes or utterly alien vistas. The universality of the show's appeal was remarkable, and for individual viewers, especially for the children and young people who grew up watching Bear Grylls, the show planted seeds that grew into something real. Outdoor education organizations reported increased interest in survival skills and wilderness activities in the years when Man vs. Wild was at its most popular. Schools incorporated Bear's techniques into outdoor education curricula. Young people who had never spent a night outside were inspired to try camping, hiking, orienteering. Some of them went on to pursue careers in outdoor education, conservation, emergency response. That is not a legacy you can dismiss, regardless of whether the horses were wild or trained or whether Bear slept in a tent or a motel. The skills were real. The inspiration was real. The impact on how a generation of young people thought about nature, about resilience, and about their own capabilities, that was profoundly real. And on the business side, the story of how Man vs. Wild ended carries a lesson that goes well beyond television. The power struggle between Discovery Channel and Bear Grylls, between a corporation that had invested in building a star and now wanted to fully control that star, and a talent who understood his own value and refused to be limited by anyone else's vision of what he should be, is a dynamic that repeats itself throughout the entertainment industry across every platform and every era. The most interesting and sustainable careers in entertainment belong to the people who resist that kind of institutional capture, who build their platform, leverage it, and then refuse to be entirely owned by any single entity. Bear Grylls did that. The decade-plus of career that followed the Man vs. Wild cancellation is the proof. So what's the story according to the one man who lived it? What Bear Grylls said, and the shocking truth behind it all. Over the years, Bear Grylls has been more candid about his career, his choices, and his setbacks than many television personalities ever allow themselves to be. In interviews, in his books, in podcasts, and public talks, he has addressed the staged scenes controversy, the Discovery split, and the broader question of what he was trying to do with Man vs. Wild with a level of honesty that is genuinely refreshing. On the question of the produced elements of the show, Bear has never tried to fully walk back or completely reframe what happened. He has acknowledged that scenarios were constructed, that certain sequences were staged for demonstrative purposes, that the show involved production support that wasn't always disclosed to audiences watching at home. He has apologized for the lack of transparency in how the early seasons were presented, but he has been equally consistent in defending the core of what the show was trying to do. The survival knowledge was genuine. The techniques, how to find water in a desert, how to signal for rescue, how to build an emergency shelter, how to navigate using natural landmarks, how to treat a venomous snakebite in the field. Those things were all real, all accurate, all potentially life-saving. The education wrapped inside the entertainment was authentic, even if the entertainment packaging was sometimes embellished. And Bear has spoken, with what sounds like genuine feeling, about the letters and messages he received from people who had used skills they learned from Man vs. Wild in real emergency situations, people who had been lost in the wilderness and found their way out because they remembered something they had seen on the show. That, for Bear, cuts through the noise of the staged scenes controversy and gets to the heart of what he was actually trying to accomplish. On the Discovery Channel dispute and the cancellation, Bear has been measured and careful. He has not publicly savaged the network. He has not laid out in explicit detail every specific point of conflict in the contract negotiations. There is clearly a mutual understanding, even in the aftermath of a difficult split, that certain things stay private. But what comes through consistently is that the dispute was fundamentally about autonomy, about who controlled his image, his time, his creative direction, and his future. And that was not something Bear Grylls was willing to surrender, not to Discovery, not to anyone. He has spoken about the importance for any creative talent of maintaining ownership of their work and their identity, of not allowing themselves to be entirely captured by any single corporate relationship, no matter how lucrative or how prestigious, of understanding that the platform is not the point. The work is the point, and the platform should serve the work, not the other way around. These are not just abstract business principles for Bear. They reflect something deep about his character. The same stubbornness, the same refusal to accept limits, the same commitment to doing things on his own terms that drove him to climb Everest with a broken back and cross the Atlantic in an inflatable boat. He applied the same mentality to his television career that he applies to everything else in his life, and the results speak for themselves. So let's bring it all together, because the real lesson of this story needs to land properly. We started with a question that millions of people have been asking for over a decade. Why was Man vs. Wild cancelled? And most people, if they thought about it at all, assumed the answer had something to do with the staged scenes scandal, with getting caught being not quite real in a genre that was supposed to be real, with the embarrassment and the fallout and the damage to credibility. The truth is far more interesting than that, and in some ways, far more inspiring. Man vs. Wild was not cancelled because Bear Grylls failed. It was not cancelled because audiences stopped caring. It was not cancelled because the show had run its course, or lost its creative energy, or damaged itself beyond repair. Man vs. Wild was cancelled because Bear Grylls was too successful to be owned. Think about what that actually means. A television network invested years and resources into building one of the most globally recognized entertainment brands in the world. And then, when they tried to use that brand to bind the man at the center of it into an expanded exclusive arrangement that would have constrained his independence, he said no. He walked. He bet on himself. That is shocking, not in a scandalous way, in a genuinely surprising, genuinely rare, genuinely admirable way. Because most people, when a powerful institution offers them security at the price of their independence, take the security. Most people, when a corporation offers them a big check to sign on the dotted line, sign. It is the easier path. It is the comfortable path. It is the safe path. Bear Grylls chose the harder path, the uncertain path, the path that required him to believe absolutely, without any guarantee, that he was worth more than what Discovery was offering, and that he could build something better without them. He was right, and the deepest truth of this whole story is this: the same essential quality that made Bear Grylls worth watching in the first place. That willingness to take enormous risks. That refusal to accept the safe and comfortable option. That stubborn, almost irrational commitment to doing things on his own terms is exactly what ended Man vs. Wild. And exactly what built everything that came after it. Bear Grylls vs. Discovery Channel was, in its own way, its own episode of Man vs. Wild. The wilderness was the entertainment industry. The survival challenge was professional independence. And Bear won. Because, at the end of the day, what can we actually learn from Bear Grylls? Outro. There it is. The full story, the complete, unfiltered, genuinely shocking truth about why Man vs. Wild was cancelled, and why it is so much more interesting than you probably thought when you clicked on this video. From a child born into adventure, raised to climb and sail and never settle for the ordinary, to an SAS soldier who broke his back falling from the sky and came back stronger, to the host of one of the most watched television shows in human history, to the man who walked away from one of the most powerful networks in cable television because he refused to be owned, and then built something even bigger. Bear Grylls' story is not a cautionary tale. It is not a rise and fall. It is not a story about a man who flew too close to the sun and got burned. It is a story about a man who understood at every stage of his life that the greatest survival skill of all is knowing who you are and refusing to let anyone else define that for you. Whether you are standing on the summit of Everest, whether you are building a fire in a blizzard, whether you are sitting across a table from a network executive holding a contract designed to bind you for years, the show may be gone. The Man vs. Wild logo may have faded from the Discovery Channel schedule, but the man is still out there, still pushing, still adventuring, still proving every single day that the limits other people place on us are almost never as real as they appear. And if there is one thing that Bear Grylls' entire extraordinary story teaches us, from the parachute accident to the Everest summit to the Discovery split to everything that came after, it is this: when life drops you into the wilderness, you do not sit down and wait to be rescued. You find the water. You build the fire, you navigate toward the horizon, and you keep moving. If this video hit different for you, I want to hear about it in the comments. Did you know the real reason Man vs. Wild ended? Were you a fan of the show growing up? And do you think Discovery Channel made the right call or the worst business decision in their history? Drop your thoughts below. Like this video if you learned something new today. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We go this deep on every single story we cover. And hit that notification bell so you never miss the next one. Until next time, stay curious, stay bold, and we'll see you in the next one.